What if your body already has the tools to fight cancer, heart disease, and even Alzheimer's? And the switch that turns those tools on is sitting on your dinner plate right now. That's the entire premise behind Dr. William Lee's book, Eat to Beat Disease. He's a Harvard-trained physician, a former director at a major Boston teaching hospital, and someone who has spent over 2 decades studying how blood vessels feed disease and how certain everyday foods can starve it before it ever takes hold. This isn't another eat clean book. There's no 30-day plan, no forbidden food list, no calorie counting. Instead, Dr. Lee makes an argument that completely reframes how you should think about eating. Your body isn't a machine that just burns fuel. It's a living defense system, and food is the information that tells that system how to behave. In the next half hour, I'm going to walk you through every major idea in this book, the science, the food lists, the research behind it, and what you can actually do with it starting tonight. Let's get into it. Before we get into the food, it's worth understanding where this guy is coming from, because it matters for how much weight you give this book. Dr. Lee trained at Harvard Medical School and went on to co-found something called the Angiogenesis Foundation, a nonprofit research organization focused on one very specific question: how do blood vessels grow, and how can we control that growth to fight disease? That might sound like a narrow academic interest. It's not. Angiogenesis, the growth of new blood vessels, turns out to be involved in an enormous range of conditions: cancer, diabetic blindness, psoriasis, endometriosis, obesity, heart disease, and more. Dr. Lee's research into this single biological process has contributed to the development of more than 40 drugs and medical therapies that are in clinical use today, treating millions of patients globally. So when he writes a book about food, he's not approaching it the way a typical wellness author might, by collecting trendy ingredients and slapping health claims on them. He's approaching it as a research scientist who spent years in a lab asking, if we can develop a drug that cuts off blood supply to a tumor, can certain foods do something similar, just more gently as part of everyday prevention? The answer, according to the research he cites throughout the book, is yes. And that discovery is really the foundation for everything else we're about to cover. He also makes a broader claim that I think is the most important idea in the entire book, so I want to put it on screen now. Your body has 5 distinct natural defense systems that protect you from disease every single day, automatically, without you doing anything. And what you eat either strengthens or weakens each one of those 5 systems. This isn't about a single magic nutrient or a specific diet label like keto or paleo. It's about understanding these 5 systems individually. So let's go through them one at a time, starting with the one that made Dr. Lee famous. Angiogenesis is the process by which your body grows new blood vessels. On its own, this is a completely normal and necessary process. It's how wounds heal, how muscle recovers after exercise, and how your body adapts to physical demands over time. But here's the catch, and this is the discovery that built Dr. Lee's entire career. Cancer cells exploit this exact same process to survive and grow. A microscopic cluster of abnormal cells, something so small it would sit comfortably on the head of a pin, cannot grow into a dangerous, detectable tumor without first developing its own private blood supply. It needs oxygen and nutrients delivered directly to it, just like any other growing tissue. So tumors release chemical signals that essentially recruit nearby blood vessels to branch toward them and feed them. Without this recruitment, the abnormal cells stay dormant, microscopic, and harmless. With it, they can become a real, dangerous tumor. This single insight changed how an entire generation of cancer researchers thinks about disease. If you could find a way to block that blood vessel recruitment, to essentially put up a roadblock before the tumor can build its supply chain, you might be able to stop cancer in a completely different way than traditional chemotherapy, which attacks cells that are already cancerous. Dr. Lee's research focus became finding angiogenesis inhibitors, substances that interfere with this blood vessel recruitment process. Pharmaceutical companies have built entire drug classes around this idea. But what Dr. Lee also discovered, and what makes this relevant to a video about food, is that several common foods contain natural compounds that perform a milder version of the same function. To be clear about what this means and doesn't mean, these foods are not a cancer treatment, and nobody is claiming you can eat your way out of an existing tumor. What the research suggests is something more preventive, that regularly eating angiogenesis modulating foods may help keep the abnormal microscopic cell clusters that occur naturally in all of our bodies from ever developing the blood supply they'd need to become a real problem in the first place. Think of it less like a treatment and more like maintenance. Green tea comes up constantly throughout the book, and there's a reason for that. It contains a compound called EGCG, which has been studied extensively for its ability to interfere with the signaling pathways tumors use to recruit blood vessels. Dr. Lee recommends drinking it regularly rather than occasionally, since the effect appears to be cumulative. Tomatoes, especially when cooked, are another major one. Raw tomatoes are good, but cooking them, particularly with a small amount of olive oil, dramatically increases the bioavailability of lycopene, the compound responsible for much of the angiogenesis-related benefit. This is actually one of the rare cases in nutrition where cooking a food makes it measurably more potent rather than less. We're doing a full separate video just on this tomato finding because it's genuinely one of the more surprising things in the book. Strawberries, along with other berries, contain compounds that show similar blood vessel modulating activity in lab studies. Soybeans and soy-based foods contain isoflavones that have been studied for this same angiogenesis-related effect, though Dr. Lee notes the research here is somewhat more mixed than with tomatoes or green tea. Red wine, in moderation, and he's very specific about the in moderation part, contains resveratrol, which has angiogenesis-inhibiting properties. But he's clear that the alcohol itself carries its own risks, so this isn't a recommendation to start drinking if you don't already. It's more of a, if you do drink, red wine has this added benefit note. The bigger picture Dr. Lee wants you to take from this entire section isn't eat these 5 things and you're protected. It's that your blood vessel network is constantly being shaped by what you eat every single day, and that shaping happens whether you're paying attention to it or not. The second defense system is regeneration, and this one is about your body's ability to repair and replace damaged tissue using stem cells. Most people think of stem cells as something exotic, related to fertility treatments or futuristic medicine. But you actually have stem cells working inside you right now, in nearly every organ. Your gut lining, for example, completely regenerates itself every few days. Your liver has a famous capacity to regrow large portions of itself after damage. Even your skin and blood are constantly being replaced through stem cell activity. The problem Dr. Lee points out is that this regenerative capacity isn't fixed. It changes based on age, lifestyle, and yes, diet. As we get older, stem cell activity naturally slows down, which is part of why wounds heal more slowly, and recovery from illness or injury takes longer. But he argues that certain foods can help support and even stimulate this stem cell activity, partially offsetting that natural decline. Here are the foods he highlights for this system. Dark chocolate, specifically varieties with 70% cacao content or higher, shows up here in a way that surprises a lot of people. The flavonoids in dark chocolate have been studied for their ability to support stem cell mobilization, essentially helping your body activate and deploy its repair cells more effectively. The catch, obviously, is that this benefit comes from the cacao content, not the sugar, so the milk chocolate bar in your pantry doesn't count. Whole grains, things like barley, oats, and whole wheat, provide a combination of fiber and specific compounds that support this regenerative system, partly through their effect on inflammation and partly through direct stem cell signaling pathways studied in the research Dr. Lee cites. Beer, in moderate amounts, gets an interesting mention. He points to specific compounds found in beer, particularly from the hops and barley, that have shown stem cell supporting effects in studies. Again, this comes with the same caveat as red wine. The alcohol itself isn't the benefit, and moderation is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Black tea also appears here, distinct from green tea's angiogenesis benefits. Black tea's fermentation process produces different compounds that are linked more specifically to this regenerative pathway. What I find useful about this section of the book is the framing Dr. Lee uses. He describes your body as having a constant low-level renovation project happening inside it, and the question is whether you're supplying that renovation project with good materials or poor ones. Skipping the raw materials doesn't stop the renovation, it just makes the results worse. The third system is your microbiome. And if you've spent any time around health content in the last few years, you've probably heard this term thrown around a lot. Dr. Lee treats your gut bacteria almost like an organ in its own right, and the research increasingly backs that framing up. You have trillions of bacteria living in your digestive tract, and they do far more than just help you digest food. They train your immune system to recognize threats. They produce compounds that regulate inflammation throughout your entire body. Some research has even linked the microbiome to mood and mental health through what's sometimes called the gut-brain connection. The challenge is that this ecosystem can be easily disrupted by antibiotics, by chronic stress, and significantly by diet. Dr. Lee's argument is that you're not just feeding yourself when you eat, you're feeding an entire population of microorganisms, and what you feed them determines whether the good bacteria or the bad bacteria gain the upper hand. Here are the key foods he recommends for supporting a healthy microbiome. Fermented foods are front and center in this section, things like kimchi, sauerkraut, and plain yogurt. These foods introduce beneficial live bacteria directly into your gut, which can help diversify and strengthen your existing microbial population. Leeks, garlic, and onions belong to a category sometimes called prebiotic foods. Rather than introducing new bacteria, these foods contain specific fibers that act as fuel for the beneficial bacteria you already have, helping them grow and outcompete less helpful strains. Whole grains and legumes also function as prebiotic fuel, and Dr. Lee notes that the fiber diversity matters as much as fiber quantity. Eating 5 different fiber sources across a week appears to support a more diverse, resilient microbiome than eating a large quantity of just one. Pomegranates get a specific mention for containing compounds that, once processed by gut bacteria, produce metabolites linked to reduced inflammation. On the flip side, and this is a point Dr. Lee makes pretty forcefully, heavily processed foods and excess added sugar don't just fail to help this system, they actively feed the less beneficial bacteria strains, creating a kind of imbalance that researchers call dysbiosis. Over time, this imbalance has been linked to everything from digestive issues to increased systemic inflammation. The fourth system is DNA protection, and this is the one most directly tied to aging and long-term disease risk. Every single day, your DNA experiences damage. This happens from completely normal sources, sun exposure, environmental pollutants, even the natural process of cells dividing and copying their DNA. Your body has a remarkable built-in repair system, full of enzymes whose entire job is to detect and fix these errors before they cause problems. When this repair system works well, damaged cells get fixed or safely removed. When it starts to fail, whether from age, chronic stress, or poor nutritional